homicide of Eliza Morales in January 2026 stands as one of the most harrowing examples of peer-to-peer transactional violence in the modern digital era. This case, centered in the quiet suburban landscape of Downers Grove, Illinois, transcends the boundaries of a simple criminal act, offering a profound look into the fragility of domestic security when intersected by the unregulated nature of social media marketplaces. The following report provides an exhaustive reconstruction of the events surrounding the death of Morales, a 30-year-old pregnant mother, and the subsequent investigation into 19-year-old Nidas Ravakas. Through the lens of forensic criminology, this analysis examines the progression from a mundane vehicle sale to a multi-count felony event involving extreme overkill, arson, and a tragic disregard for human life. The incident originated within the ecosystem of Facebook Marketplace, a platform that has revolutionized local commerce while simultaneously creating unique vectors for criminal proximity. Unlike traditional retail environments, peer-to-peer exchanges often necessitate meetings at private residences or in isolated public spaces, stripping away the institutional safety nets typically present in commercial interactions. In the case of the Morales family, the transaction involved a 1994 Ford Ranger pickup truck, a vehicle that, despite its age, served as the catalyst for a dispute that would end in a double homicide, the death of Eliza Morales and her unborn child. On January 24, 2026, Gabriel Morales, Eliza's husband, listed the vehicle for sale. Later that day, Nidas Ravakas, a 19-year-old from neighboring Westmont, responded to the advertisement and traveled to the Morales residence in the 2300 block of Ogden Avenue to finalize the purchase. The initial interaction appeared successful, but it left behind a critical administrative gap. The license plates remained on the truck, and the bill of sale was not completed. A follow-up meeting was scheduled for Monday, January 26, 2026, to rectify these oversights. This mundane logistical necessity would provide the opportunity for the suspect to return to the home with lethal intent. The timeline of the Morales homicide is characterized by a rapid escalation from a civil dispute to a violent rampage. The following table delineates the critical milestones of the case, from the initial contact to the suspect's return to custody. The offender, Nidas Ravakas, presents a profile that challenges typical actuarial risk assessments in criminology. Born April 6, 2006, the 19-year-old had no prior criminal history at the time of the attack. He was a resident of the 1400 block of Spruce Street in Westmont and had recently graduated from Downers Grove North High School. His professional trajectory appeared stable. He was employed by a painting company and was engaged in vocational studies to become an electrician. He lived with his girlfriend's family, suggesting a level of social integration that rarely precedes spontaneous extreme violence. However, the psychological trigger for the crime appears to have been a perceived slight or deception regarding the vehicle transaction. Ravakas told investigators that he believed Gabriel Morales had messed him over because the 1994 Ford Ranger had a malfunctioning engine. In the mind of the offender, this mechanical failure was not merely a risk of purchasing a 32-year-old vehicle, but a personal affront. This perception of being victimized in a commercial deal led to what forensic psychologists term displaced aggression, where the anger felt toward Gabriel was redirected at Eliza Morales when he arrived at the apartment and Gabriel was not present. The transition from frustration to premeditated violence is evidenced by surveillance footage. While the initial meeting in the vestibule was reportedly calm enough for Eliza to hand him a screwdriver to help remove with the plates, the suspect's behavior shifted moments later. He was captured on video entering the building with the screwdriver held behind his back, a clear tactical concealment that indicates his intent was no longer administrative. This shift suggests that the blackout Ravakas claimed during his confession was likely a post hoc rationalization for a deliberate escalation of force. The apartment unit in the 2300 block of Ogden Avenue became the site of an exceptionally violent confrontation. When the Downers Grove Fire Department arrived at 6:09 p.m., they were responding to a standard fire alarm, but they found a scene of complex criminality. Eliza Morales was located near the front door of her unit, a position that forensics suggests was an attempt to escape the premises. The autopsy revealed that Morales was stabbed approximately 70 times. The concentration of these wounds is highly significant in forensic analysis. The majority of the 70 injuries were located on the victim's head, neck, and chest. In the field of pathology, this pattern is termed overkill, the infliction of more injury than is necessary to cause death. Overkill typically signals a high level of emotional volatility and a personal connection to the rage, even if the victim and offender were essentially strangers. The instruments used were a knife and a screwdriver, with the latter likely being the tool Eliza had provided him only minutes prior. Forensic evidence also included defensive wounds on Morales' hands and arms, indicating a desperate and sustained struggle for survival. This physical evidence directly contradicts any narrative of a quick or accidental escalation. The struggle was prolonged, and the victim reportedly pleaded for her life, informing the suspect that she was pregnant. Following the murder, the offender attempted to destroy the evidence of his crime through arson. Investigators identified two distinct points of origin for the fire, a hallmark of intentional incendiary acts. 1. Kitchen origin. The suspect gathered household chemicals, sanitizer, and various items, placing them on the stovetop to create a concentrated fire using cleaners as an accelerant. 2. Entryway origin. A second fire was set near the front door, precisely where the victim's body was located. The forensic pathology report noted the presence of soot in Morales' airway, a critical detail suggesting that while she suffered fatal stab wounds, she was still respirationally active enough to inhale smoke when the fire was ignited. This finding elevates the cruelty of the act, as it implies the victim was alive during the initial stages of the fire. Furthermore, the use of household sanitizer and cleaners as accelerants shows a level of opportunistic resourcefulness that aligns with an organized hybrid offender profile. The suspect's violence was not limited to the human occupants of the home. The family's 9-year-old pit bull, Zula, was also targeted. Forensic examination of the dog revealed a stab wound between the eyes and evidence that the animal had been kicked. The dog survived by escaping through a sliding glass patio door as the fire spread, eventually receiving care at a veterinary hospital. The assault on the animal is a significant behavioral marker, often associated with individuals who seek to exert total control and destruction over a domestic environment during a high-stress criminal event. The behavior of Nidas Ravukas following the homicide provides deep insight into his cognitive state. He did not immediately surrender. Instead, he engaged in a series of steps to sanitize his appearance and dispose of incriminating evidence. Ravukas was seen on video at an Ace Hardware store shortly after the murder, where he reportedly cleaned himself in the restroom. This calm, methodical approach to hygiene and evidence disposal after committing a brutal double homicide and arson is often indicative of an offender who is attempting to reintegrate into their normal life quickly. However, the police investigation, aided by the DuPage County Metropolitan Emergency Response and Investigation Team, task force was able to track his movements with precision. Upon his arrest at 11:42 p.m. on Tuesday, January 27th, Ravukas initially maintained a facade but eventually broke down and confessed. He led detectives to the specific locations where he had stashed the evidence, including the sweatshirt and the pieces of Morales' destroyed phone. This confession, while emotional, provided the state with an airtight narrative of the events, though it left the motive as nothing more than a disproportionate reaction to a used truck deal. The legal proceedings against Nidas Ravukas are being handled by DuPage County State's Attorney Robert Berlin, who has characterized the case as one of the most troubling in his tenure. The charges filed against the suspect are comprehensive and designed to reflect the multifaceted nature of the crime. Ravukas faces multiple counts of first-degree murder, among other high-level felonies. In Illinois, first-degree murder typically carries a sentence of 20 to 60 years. However, the state has announced its intention to seek a natural life sentence. To achieve this, prosecutors must prove that the crime was exceptionally brutal and heinous, indicative of wanton cruelty. The charges include 1. First-degree murder, 3 counts, reflecting the various legal theories of the intentional killing of Eliza Morales. 2. Intentional homicide of an unborn child, a Class X felony that accounts for the death of the 5-month-old fetus. 3. Aggravated arson, charged because the fire was set in an occupied building and was used to conceal a forcible felony. 4. Armed robbery, based on the theft of the victim's phone and her husband's debit card at the time of the murder. 5. Aggravated cruelty to animals, stemming from the stabbing and kicking of the dog, Zula. During the detention hearing, Judge Joshua Deaton granted the state's motion to deny pretrial release under the provisions of the Safety Act, concluding that Revucas posed a clear and present threat to the community. The judge noted the suspect's complete disregard for the life of a pregnant woman and the sheer violence of the 70 stab wounds as primary factors in this decision. The charge of intentional homicide of an unborn child is particularly significant. Under Illinois law, the state does not need to prove that the fetus was viable at the time of the crime, only that the offender knew or should have known the woman was pregnant and acted with the intent to cause death or great bodily harm. Given that Morales explicitly told Revucas she was pregnant during the attack, the state's burden for this charge is bolstered by the suspect's own statements during his confession. To understand the full impact of this crime, one must examine the victimology of Eliza Morales. A 30-year-old resident of Downers Grove, Morales was a high school sweetheart of her husband Gabriel. The couple had a 1-year and 5-month-old daughter who was fortunately not home at the time of the attack. Morales was a professional in the payroll department at Lurie Children's Hospital, an institution that serves the most vulnerable members of the Chicago region. Her colleagues and family described her as a humanitarian and a loving mother who was known for her kindness. At the time of her death, she was not only working, but also attending school to further her career, demonstrating a commitment to her family's future that was abruptly terminated over a mechanical dispute regarding a vehicle she didn't even drive. The community response has been a mixture of grief and outrage. A memorial of flowers and candles was erected outside the apartment building, and Lurie Children's Hospital issued statements reflecting the loss of a valued member of their administrative team. The family's tragedy is compounded by the fact that the meeting was intended to be a simple act of honesty, returning license plates that had been inadvertently left behind. The case took another dramatic turn on January 29, 2026, when Nettis Revucas was found injured in his cell at the DuPage County Jail. The incident occurred at approximately 4:54 p.m., just hours after the state had announced they would seek a life sentence. Authorities determined that the injuries were self-inflicted and that no other detainees were involved. Revucas was transported to an undisclosed hospital in critical condition, leading to a temporary halt in the legal proceedings. This act of self-harm is often seen in high-profile homicide cases involving young, first-time offenders who experience a situational crisis upon realizing the permanence of their incarceration and the severity of their charges. By February 1, 2026, Revucas was medically cleared and returned to the jail. His next major court date is set for February 18, 2026, for his formal arraignment. This incident of self-harm, while legally a separate matter, may be utilized by the defense to argue for a diminished capacity or a state of extreme mental distress, though it does not provide a legal defense for the initial act of murder under Illinois law. The Morales homicide is part of a disturbing trend of marketplace violence. While millions of transactions occur safely every day on social media platforms, the inherent trust-based system of these exchanges is increasingly being exploited by both opportunistic and violent offenders. The case reveals 3 primary safety deficits that occur in peer-to-peer sales. 1. Residential proximity, allowing a stranger to know one's home address and the internal layout of one's apartment. 2. Transactional isolation. Eliza Morales was home alone with the suspect during the second meeting. 3. The second meeting. Trap. Often the initial sale is calm, leading to a false sense of security that results in lower vigilance during follow-up interactions. In the wake of this tragedy, law enforcement agencies across the country have redoubled their efforts to promote safe exchange zones. These zones, typically located in the parking lots of police departments, are monitored by 24/7 surveillance cameras and provide a neutral, high-visibility environment that acts as a deterrent to violence. The Downers Grove Police Department and others emphasize that no transaction, no matter how small or big, is worth the risk of a residential meeting with a stranger. The homicide of Eliza Morales by Nidas Ravukas is a textbook case of how a minor civil grievance can escalate into a catastrophic criminal event in the absence of traditional social and institutional barriers. The offender's transition from a mundane painter and student to a double murderer and arsonist in the span of 48 hours indicates a profound psychological volatility that was triggered by a transactional dispute. The forensic evidence, specifically the 70 stab wounds and the use of chemical accelerants, paints a picture of an offender who was not merely trying to resolve a dispute, but was attempting a total annihilation of the perceived source of his frustration. The inclusion of the family dog as a victim and the theft of the husband's debit card further suggest a breakdown of moral inhibitions during the commission of the crime. As the case moves toward trial, the prosecution's focus on the heinous and brutal nature of the act is supported by the physical evidence and the suspect's own post-offense conduct. For the community of Downers Grove and the family of Eliza Morales, the case remains a stark reminder of the potential for extreme violence to intrude into the most domestic settings through the conduit of modern digital marketplaces. The ultimate resolution of this case will likely set a significant precedent in DuPage County regarding the sentencing of young offenders who commit acts of wanton cruelty within the context of peer-to-peer commerce. The survival of the dog, Zula, and the rapid apprehension of Ravukas provide small measures of justice. But the loss of a mother and her unborn child over a used truck is a loss that the legal system can never fully remediate. This case serves as a critical data point for law enforcement, sociologists, and digital platform developers in the ongoing effort to secure the Wild West of social media-facilitated local trade. Thank you for watching. Kindly subscribe to my channel if you like what I'm doing, so you would be notified when I post another crime story